If I ask you to think about a popular board game that has managed to stay relevant for a long time, then a lot of you is probably thinking about games like chess, checkers, Ludo, and so on. But I bet a lot of you weren't thinking about this game, Settlers of Catan, which for me personally is probably the greatest board game ever made. And while the Settlers of Catan have always been a very popular board game, this popularity has seemingly been hitting completely new levels in the past 1.5 years, and today I will try to explain why that is and what makes Catan such an amazing board game. Alright, so for all the people who have never played Catan before, this is a quick rundown of the game. The base game can be played with a maximum of 4 players, and sees each player taking on the role of settlers, trying to build roads, settlements, and cities on a small hexagonal island. The island itself is made up of 19 hexagonal tiles, that each represent one of 5 different resources that the player can collect. Roads, settlements, and cities are built in the spaces between the hexagons, and at the start of each player's turn, 2 dice are rolled, and for whatever number comes up on the dice, will then produce that resource for every player who has a settlement adjacent to that tile. Surrounding the island is the ocean, where different ports are located which allow the players to trade at favorable ratios with the bank. In addition to the roads, settlements, and cities, there is one more thing that you can build in the game: development cards. These are separate shuffled decks of cards that contain 5 different types of cards that each carry different abilities that can be used to benefit yourself and also punish your opponents. One allows you to rob from your opponents. One allows you to seize a specific resource from everyone. One allows you to build free roads. One allows you to take any 2 resources that you want. And one simply gives you a victory point. And victory points are the way that you win the game. Whoever gets to 10 victory points first is the winner. And these can be obtained through the previously named card, from settlements, from cities, and from one of 2 achievements: building the longest road or building the largest army. Now, from what I might have told you, Catan might seem like most other board games, and maybe not as a board game that would be complex enough or long-lasting enough to still seek success a total of 28 years after it was first published. And yet, it has. One estimate concluded that 32 million copies have been sold since its inception, making it the 14th most popular board game of all time in terms of sales. And I would argue that its popularity comes down to 3 important factors. Number 1, randomness. Perhaps one of the most ingenious parts of the game's design is its use of hexagonal tiles for its map. This is because using these as loose tiles that you can place down randomly instead of having a preset map allows for a complete randomness in the setup of the game, and makes it so that every time you sit down to play, you're looking at a new board with new dilemmas. Having the number markers for the resources also be loose and applied randomly only furthers this randomness more, and even the location of the ports that you can use for trading is also randomized. Depending on how you do the board setup and any potential home rules that you decide to use, it has been calculated that there is somewhere between 1.5 trillion to 272 octillion different ways that the board can be arranged. If you decide to count all of the different ways that the development card deck can be shuffled, there is approximately 51 dodecillion different board setups. Meaning that when I say that every single time you sit down to play, you're playing a new board, you really are playing a new board every single time you sit down to play. This randomness keeps the game fresh every single time, and constantly creates new dilemmas and decisions for you to make as you try to deduce where you should place your settlements and roads. Number 2. Depth of play. While on the surface the game might seem quite easy to play and understand, the truth is that at higher levels, the game can also become extremely complex. This blend of complexity is perfect since it makes the game easy to get into, but also allows for incredibly detailed plays that keep long-time players interested. One example might be the initial placements of players. Before the game actually begins and people start rolling dice, every player needs to place 2 settlements and 2 roads to act as their starting positions. The order of placement is in that of a pyramid, meaning whoever places their first settlement and road will place their second settlement and road last, with the 4th player placing back to back. If you are a beginner and don't know how to place well, you might just be placing semi-randomly, but as an experienced player, this creates the need for a lot of calculation. When you place, you both have to identify the current spots that are the strongest for you to place on, but you also have to try and anticipate where the other players will settle and what spots will be coming back around to you. In addition to this, experienced players are also thinking about a bunch of other concepts and strategies, like which win condition they want to go for with their setup, what the ratios are between the different resources and their number diversity, which ports are important to them and how do they get there. Placing your starting roads are also very difficult, as you want to place them in directions heading for good spots for you to settle, but not so good that they will end up being taken by other players beforehand. All of these concepts and ideas only have to do with what good players are thinking about before the game has even begun, and this level of depth only expands as the game actually gets underway. This allows for such a deep level of gameplay that players can always keep improving and studying the game, even creating elaborate secondhand material to further analyze the game and its nuances. But perhaps the greatest aspect of Catan is its ability to bring people together. Or apart. Number 3. Social engagement. If you already know the rules of Catan, or you're just an exceptionally eagle-eyed viewer, you will have realized previously that on these boards that I've been showing you, there is no resource marker for the number 7, despite it being the number that is statistically the most likely to roll. This is because the game has a mechanic known as the robber. He starts on the desert tile, a tile that produces no resources, and once 7 is rolled, he is activated by the player who rolled the 7. First of all players must check whether or not they have more than 7 cards in their hands. If they do, they must discard half. Hereafter, the player who rolled the 7 can move the robber to any tile that he wants. The tile that the robber is placed on will now no longer produce resources when its number is rolled, and the player can choose one of the players who has a settlement adjacent to that tile and take one random card from them. The robber is also activated in this manner by playing one of the development cards that we talked about earlier. There are many other ways that players can interact in the game, but this is single-handedly the best one, as it instantly starts an uproar of discussion between players about who's the greatest threat and needs to be blocked, with people trying desperately to convince or even bribe the player into placing the robber in a specific spot.
How many fucking points do I got? 1, 2. How many points does he have?
How many points do I have now?
I will never play this game again. I will never play this game again.
How many points do I have now?
I will never.
How many points do I have now? Tell her. Tell her.
I will never play this game again. I got fucking 2 points. He's got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Why would you put it on me? That's real smart.
Because that number was coming out a lot.
It doesn't matter. It's not the game. He's got 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. I'm never going to play this game again.
Because you're a sword.
I'm not a sword. You don't know how to play. The fuck does that do for you? You got to block him, not me. He's got all the points.
I picked the card I needed from you. And I got to settle.
Wait, come on. I'm done.
Besides this, I also mentioned previously that you can trade with the bank. However, this is often not your best option, as this requires exchange rates of 4-1, 3-1, or maybe 2-1 depending on which ports you have access to. But the players can also trade with each other, creating a vibrant social setting of barter and bribes as people bid for different resources and try to undercut other players, or try to make creative deals, like promising not to rob them the next time they roll a 7. All of these factors have led to a hugely successful game, that managed to develop a competitive championship all the way back in 2002, and which is still going strong, having recently hosted the 2022 championships in Malta. But the really big break for Catan was breaking into the online space. The company behind Catan had been trying to do this for a long time, eventually launching Catan Universe for free on Steam back in early 2017. However, as the ratings show, this version didn't get a lot of love and was generally quite clanky to play on. But fortunes would change later in that year as another site launched called colonist.io. This was an unofficial version of the game, not made by the original company, but by another team. This version was also free, but made the game a lot more streamlined, having a very clean and easy to use UI. The website quickly began to see explosive growth, reaching almost 1 million active monthly players by January of 2023. With it, it also brought an online ranking list with tiers reminiscent of most other video games, meaning you could now compete with the best in the world and rise in the rankings. In addition, Discord servers around colonist.io would spring up, hosting unofficial tournaments, leagues, and even some cash tournaments. Multiple content creators would also spring up around the game, probably most famously Delighted, who would create videos around the game and his exploits, resulting in videos that would reach over 1 million people. Perhaps the most crazy thing of all of this is that so far I've only talked about Catan, the base game. But in addition to this, the game has received another 4 expansions, which introduce new rules, mechanics, and units to the game. And if you're feeling even a little more thirsty for Catan content, there is an additional 21 different Catan products or games for you to enjoy. Personally, I have only ever played 3 of these, but if I wanted to branch out, I certainly could do so for a long time before running out. So now, hopefully, you understand why I and so many other people like this board game so much. For me, it is simply the most exciting, social, and strategic board game that I've ever played, and its ability to be replayed hundreds of times without getting stale has resulted in 28 years of dominance of the board gaming space. And hopefully, there are many more years to come. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate if you took the time to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me. Thank you.